Okay, I shall begin the seminar. Welcome, everyone. I'm very delighted to host and chair today's seminar. My name is Claire McManus. I'm the subject group lead for the subject of Central and East European Studies within the Division of Political and International Studies, which is part of the School of Social and Political Sciences at the University of Glasgow. And this is a co-badged seminar with our colleagues who lead the journal Identities, Global Studies in Culture, Power. And these colleagues are based in the subject group of sociology, which is based in the Division of Sociological and Cultural Studies within our School of Social and Political Sciences. And just a few words about the Identities journal. It is an interdisciplinary journal. It explores the formation and transformation of racial, ethnic, national, transnational, and post-colonial identities in the contemporary world. And the journal draws on and also synthesizes these insights from across sociology, cultural studies, political sciences, area studies, social psychology, and many other subjects. And the journal is very much engaged with emerging scholars, and particularly emerging scholars who are working through these debates around culture, identity, race, and ethnicity. And that's why the subject matter of today's talk is very timely. Today's talk is titled Eastern Europe's Peripheral Whiteness, Class and Gender Racialization amongst Polish Migrants and Returnees. And I'm delighted that we have two speakers today from the Faculty of Sociology from Warsaw University, from the University of Warsaw. The first speaker is Dr. Dominika Blachnicka-Ciacek, and our second speaker is Dr. Sylwia Urbańska. And Dominika has her research focuses on the role of memory, place, political narratives, and conflict in shaping belonging and exclusion among refugees and immigrant communities. She's currently leads a research grant called Engagement from Afar, a multi-sited ethnography of Ukrainian diaspora's responses to war. In 2024-25, she was a visiting professor at Rutgers University in New York, and she is a recipient of a 2024 Minister of Higher Education's Award for Outstanding Young Scholar. She holds a PhD in visual sociology from Goldsmiths, University of London, and I noticed that she was also studied at one of our partner universities on our Erasmus Mundus program at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow. Dr. Sylwia Urbańska is an assistant professor in the Department of Economic Sociology in the Faculty of Sociology at Warsaw University. Her research and publications focus on transformations in family life, intimacy, and gender patterns in migration and rural communities. She was a principal investigator of the research grant Non-Traditional Traditional Transformations of Rural Families from Women's Perspectives from 1989 until 2019, and she is the author of the book Matka Polska, Mother Poland from a Distance, and co-author of the monograph Beyond Borders, Gender in Catholic Migrant Organizations. So that's a brief biography of both our speakers. Each speaker will present, and the combined presentation will last for about 45 minutes, and we'll leave some room for discussion. We aim to finish the seminar at 5:30, and you will have the opportunity to pose any questions through the chat. So I would like to now hand over to our speakers and thank you, the audience, for coming along today. I'm delighted that we have 41 participants on the call. So I'm looking very much forward to the presentation and to the discussion. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. Good afternoon, good evening. So it's really a pleasure to be here with you. Hello to our friends and colleagues, and also to people we don't know yet. So today, together with Sylwia, we will be developing this idea of peripheral whiteness, especially focusing on the experiences of Polish migrants to the West, but also Polish ex-migrants, so returnees who are now back in Poland. And in particular, looking through the lens of class and gender. So we are really want to invite you to this journey to look at this process of racialization through the intersectional lens. And I just would like to take a minute to say that our talk is based on the article which is already out in Identities. Thank you, Identities, for publishing our work and for inviting us. But I would also like to say that it's part of the special issue, upcoming special issue called Global Configurations of Whiteness, that will be out soon, where many other brilliant articles will be part of this sort of dialogue. So I encourage you to check that. And they are wonderfully edited by Professor Ipek Demir and Karim Modri. And so thank you also to our guest editors. Yeah, so I'll start by briefly introducing the idea of peripheral whiteness, which I'm aware of might sort of spark controversies. We also like to outline sort of our methodological approach in which we do something we've actually never done before, because we sort of base our analysis on sort of bringing together three separate streams of research. Then we're gonna present some of the findings along the two axes that we will be talking about. So the sort of intersection of racialization of class position and racialization and gender. And at the end, we'll offer some conclusions and directions, maybe for further research, because as we speak, we feel that the situation, especially in the context of war in Ukraine and Ukrainians in Poland, is so dynamic that some of the findings that we discuss keep changing. So peripheral whiteness, is that even a thing? So when we started this conversation with Sylwia, we had this metaphor of a swing that we kept coming back to. And we feel that there is some worth in thinking about Eastern European whiteness as peripheral, because we feel that it has been constructed as inferior vis-a-vis the sort of notions of Western whiteness, but also obviously it partakes it takes part in this global positionalities, and it is a position that is privileged vis-a-vis global South, and those positioned as non-white or less white, even if they live in the so-called West. So we see it as ambiguous and really sort of swinging between this axis of deficits and axis of privilege. And it's really simultaneously constituted by these two drivers. So there is now a brilliant literature that discuss these notions of Eastern Europeanness as inferior. So it stems from this idea that Eastern Europe is peripheral to the West, and this peripherality is about economic underdevelopment, and Eastern Europe, and to some extent Southern Europe, seen as this reservoir of cheap labor or cheaper labor. So cheap labor and maybe lack or less sort of economic innovation, for instance. And but also constituted culturally as sort of other, as Europe's other, as this European maybe backwaters, maybe a bit wilder, a bit more barbaric, less civilized. Sort of there's this metaphor of white polar bears that our participants often bring out in a conversation in terms of assuming how the Western gaze sees the Eastern Europe. And likewise, people migrating from the East to the West, Eastern European migrants, and of course there are internal hierarchies within these groups too, are therefore seen as less white, experiencing racialization as not quite, and sort of having often this in-between positionalities. Yet, although in Eastern Europe, and I guess particularly in Poland, we sort of like to imagine ourselves as really not entangled in this Western racial colonial project, as recent scholarship demonstrate, actually this kind of imaginings of racial superiority have been present in sort of Polish narrative, national narrative for many decades. And Poland has imagined itself in terms of racial superiority for quite some time. So Eastern European migrants, including Polish migrants, are privileged, and they use what Kalmar calls this sort of partial privilege, and they are seen as culturally closer to other groups in the West, rendered as non-white or less white, both in Western Europe, as I said, but also in Eastern Europe. And so this is a sort of where we situate our discussion, but we also want to bring you and add another element which we feel is really important when thinking about this peripheral whiteness of Eastern Europeans. Because since 2021, Poland and wider region is experiencing this new geopolitical position with the opening of new migration routes to Europe from Belarus through Lithuania and from Belarus through Poland, as well as the influx of war refugees from Ukraine. Therefore, Poland and to large extent also Lithuania start to play this kind of new role as Europe's gatekeepers. So this sort of hitherto backwaters, these peripheries, Europe's peripheries, suddenly gain new, quite important political and imaginative power in terms of deciding who can be in, who can belong to this community, EU community of value, and who should stay out of this. As I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, the really central element of our analysis is to look at these processes of racialization and how this Eastern European whiteness swings from the privilege to deficit, looking at the intersections with other social categories, particularly in categories such as class and gender. We feel that a class positionality and gender identities, when we analyze our data, are really crucial in sort of reenacting this axis of either deficit or privilege. so particular gender identity may reinforce the sense of deficit, and certain class positionalities can, for instance, help migrants to get away with experiences of racialization. And as I mentioned briefly at the beginning of the talk, when we started having these discussions, Sylwia had already worked a lot with Polish migrant activists in Belgium and in other Western European countries. She was also engaged with the Polish returnee migrants in Podlasie region, so Polish Eastern borderlands, so the region that borders with Belarus. And me myself, together with my colleagues, we have just completed this research in which we looked at the experiences of Polish migrants in the UK in the context of Brexit. So, and when we started talking about our different findings, we realized that rather than produce new data, maybe there would be a value in sort of bringing together these three seemingly different projects, but all concerning migrants and returnees, and reanalyze them and sort of looking for these intersections of class, labor, and racialization, and gender and racialization. So the way we did this, we used the strategy of looking for similarities and then differences to be able to draw some theoretical suggestions. Yeah, so now I'm coming to the section where I would like to start telling you a little bit more about the findings and results of this analysis that we took. And whilst I already said that many of the Eastern European migrants have experienced various forms of subtle and not subtle racialization as not quite white, there are a number of people, especially in our UK sample, that actually were able to sort of escape this experience of racialization and pass as white. So this is Amelia, who is a manager in large media company in London. And this is what she says in the interview, and I need to move the windows with your faces. I find it easier to blend in as I don't have a Polish accent. So nobody is able to guess by my accent or my looks that I'm Polish. This is helpful because people don't think in this stereotypical manner when she hides this. Not that I want to hide my Polishness, but I don't want to show it off. If people ask me, I would reveal that I'm from Poland, but I don't want to make a first impression as a Pole. And so in this quote, Amelia, as some other of our research participants, draw on their cultural capital, such as flawless knowledge of English, such as ability of not looking Polish, to sort of escape this racialization. And what helps is the fact that they happen to work in what we could call middle-class jobs. Some other respondents recall having a date where other people would tell them that if this person English was more Eastern European, he wouldn't find that person so attractive. So some of our participants have skills and are capable of hide the sort of Eastern European traits of their personalities in order to project this image of sort of middle classness, or rather white middle classness, and hide this Eastern European deficit. However, most of the people that Sylwia spoke to, and many people that we spoke to in Britain, actually don't have this capacity of being able to get through this sort of glass ceiling of white-collar jobs, or hide their Eastern European accent or looks, whatever it means, and experience different forms of subtle and around Brexit, less subtle forms of discrimination, harassment, that they experience at work, but in their everyday life. And it feels that in order to sort of secure, to sort of cement this position that is quite ambiguous, so their ambiguous whiteness, they often, as we see in our interviews, revert to really reassessing their Eastern European whiteness, using this even partial privilege to racialize others. And here is a quote of Zosia, who has been working in a factory for a number of years before Brexit. And just literally a few weeks before we interviewed her, she was promoted to the sort of office work. So she was now overseeing the work of other factory workers. And interestingly, in these interviews, she talks really warmly about her Lithuanian and Romanian colleagues, and she is abhorred about the racism experienced by her Romanian colleagues. She tells how hardworking Lithuanians are. So in a way, she constructs this kind of sisterhood or brotherhood of Eastern European white, hardworking people. And it feels that to summon this, she says something like this. So every person comes here to the UK to make money, to have a better life, you know. If this person doesn't hurt me, doesn't take my money from my bank account, why should I have friction with them? So she seems to be embracing this idea of diversity that she encounters in Britain, but she uses abhorring word in Polish chapati, are super lazy. I had issues with them at work. I'm not racist, but you've heard about those terrorist attacks in London, right? Of course, not every Muslim person is a terrorist, but every terrorist, you know what I mean. It makes you think. So here we can read this quote as the instance of trying to navigate the sort of hierarchies of racialized labor market in the UK. And she's doing it, but by racializing, in this case, not necessarily other migrants, but other citizens of Britain who happen to be of color. So here, the process that is taking place is this attempt to leverage the privilege of whiteness to racialize other non-white citizens and non-white migrants too. And we see similar accounts and similar processes where we go through Sylwia's and her team's interviews from Belgium, where she did interviews with Polish care workers and Polish construction workers. But also, this is something that those migrants seem to be bringing back to Poland and projected towards those coming through the Belarusian border. So from the UK through Belgium, we are now in Poland at this Polish-Belarusian border region, Podlasie, where Sylwia and her colleagues were doing research with returned migrants. And it feels that in many of these interviews, we see that this experience of racialized labor market in Belgium, where it's difficult for Polish migrants to sort of, again, cross this glass ceiling, but within the cleaning sector or construction sector, they become these kingmakers and queen makers when it comes to that particular sector. So Adela represents the sort of elite class of sort of cleaning workers in Belgium, and uses her whiteness as the sort of way into this labor market where her, even if, but Eastern European, but still European whiteness is seen as a privilege. And yet they use this sort of experiences to say this. This is what she says. The wave will come as it came to Belgium. So she sort of translates the experiences from sort of migratory labor market in Belgium to the Polish circumstances, and they will stay here. These people don't want to work. They don't even know how to work. They are just trying to find a way to get money. In Belgium, they have taken over the municipalities and want more and more. They still can't get enough. So she takes these experiences from Belgium to project them on the asylum seekers on the Polish-Belarusian border, who are mainly people fleeing from Syria, from Afghanistan, to some extent from Iran and other post-Soviet republics, to construct them in opposition to this Eastern European work ethic of hardworking people, projecting them as eager to overuse the European welfare system, actually coming to Europe but not really willing to work. So while she seemed to be commenting on their capabilities and willingness to work, she also, and we will hear about this more when Sylwia takes over, she also constructs them as a cultural threat, using by now this well-known metaphors of waves and floods and using the fact that many of them are Muslim to portray this group as a cultural threat. Interestingly, at the same time, we are in the same Eastern Polish borderlands, where a year later, in early, not even few months later, in early 2022, the Polish-Ukrainian border witnesses an influx of war refugees from Ukraine. And at that specific instance, those Ukrainian refugees are sort of constructed completely differently. So while before 2022, Ukrainian workers in Poland had been also racialized as sort of less white, less European, suddenly they become this hardworking brothers and sisters. So those who are in Poland are seen as hardworking, but also we see in the interviews how people are really, these returned migrants are really appreciative of the fact that some of them return to join the fight, and they construct the sort of similarities between the Ukrainian history and Polish history, that Ukrainians fight for freedom like Poles did in the past. And also suddenly they are constructed as culturally close, so sharing the work ethic and sort of sharing this Eastern European peripheral whiteness with this Polish returned migrants. So now I'll pass over to Sylwia who will focus our discussion on the intersection between race and gender. Over to you, Sylwia.
Hi, thank you for the invitation. Now is my turn. Thank you, Dominika, for your excellent presentation of the first parts. Dominika discussed the discrepancy between the treatment of the refugees at the Belarusian-Polish border and the Ukrainian-Polish border in the context of labor and class positions. And this opposition, this discrepancy, when we take deeper look at Poland's eastern border, is even more significant when we look at how genderization of identities catalyze the process of racialization. The gender dimension is equally important in that processes. We see since the creation of two distinct refugee routes on the Polish eastern borders, these roads, Polish-Belarusian and Polish-Ukrainian, have been perceived and contrasted through gendered imaginaries. The road on the Polish-Belarusian border, managed by the Lukashenko-Putin alliance, is portrayed as very masculinized. Since the journey, because this is the road from refugees from Middle East, from Asia, from Africa, from which the roads are particularly dangerous, significantly more men decide, and because of that significantly more men decide to embark on these difficult roads. But the way how these refugees, asylum seekers are portrayed, the masculinization of this migration road plays very important role in the racialization process. And what is important that these men trying to cross into Europe are not perceived in light of the hardship they have endured. They are perceived rather as traitors who abandoned their homeland and families instead of fighting for it like Ukrainians, which serve as ideal examples in the first phase of the full-scale war. They serve as ideal refugees, and they were contrasted to the refugees from the Polish-Belarusian road. And here is a quote from man from the Borders village in Podlasie, in eastern borderland region of Poland. This man is former economic migrant in Belgium, and he said, they are cowards because asylum seekers on the Polish-Belarusian border, they are cowards because they are selfishly fleeing from war, leaving his women, mothers, wives, and children in the country of war. So this is very typical way of presenting these refugees from this part of from the Polish-Belarusian border. And what is also interesting, it is when asylum seekers on the Polish-Belarusian border are seen with women and children on the refugee trail, their motives are also deciphered as a calculating strategy to elicit sympathy from border police. Alternatively, they also are presented as irresponsible men who should be aware that women and children cannot be endangered on such a challenging road. So none of their strategies are legitimized. They are presented as a type of masculinity that threatens. They are, to sum up, they are portrayed as irresponsible men, traitors, cowards, cunning, calculating, and it is associated with non-whiteness and also with non-deservingness to belong to the racialized community of European value. In contrast, refugees from Ukraine are presented in completely different gendered way, as can be seen in the second quote. This is a quote from construction worker living in Borders village in Podlasie. The very next day, the Ukrainian men packed up and went to fight. Before they left, they asked their Polish bosses or fellow co-workers to take care of their wives, mothers-in-law and children, which they sent in a while later. So this is completely different way of portrayals in the first months of after full-scale invasion. So the next slide, please. So migrants from the Polish-Ukrainian border are treated completely differently. They are portrayed as an example of the ideal refugees. Of course, they are also allowed in Poland. The whole society mobilize private funds to help and care about refugees, Ukrainian refugees in Poland. In the first year, into Poland entered about few million of Ukrainian refugees. So this is very this is the moment in Poland which with unusual mobilization, with a lot of private people, volunteers. Mostly it is not organized by government, but this is organized bottom up from ordinary. The help is organized from ordinary people first. So this is unusual moment, a kind of breaking point also for people in Poland because of this kind of collective mobilization. And the opposite situation is on the Polish-Belarusian border, where we had in those moments a kind of state emergency zone, military zone which is militarized by soldiers. In this kind of zone, all the human conventions have been suspended, not treated, was banned and abandoned. So it was completely different two worlds on the eastern border of Poland. But what is also interesting in this construction of ideal Ukrainian asylum seeker is we observe patterns of constructing the brotherhood, the kind of brotherhood of Central and Eastern European, which emerged from this which is seen in this kind of representation. So what is the core of this brotherhood, of this connection, and in this kind of construction of whiteness, because it is the core. Polish people who always have resisted Russians see Ukrainians similar and see them as similar because they die as patriots, like always Poles died in the history. So Polish and Ukrainians could share this kind of heroic victim collective identity, the same traits of being patriot. So these patterns, because in Polish culture we have enormous high position for dead fighters, dead hero who was fight and died in fighting about Polish independence, who fight mostly with Russians about Polish independence. So this moment that we, in the first part, when we could share this kind of values, was very important to feel that we are a kind of collective we. And the Ukrainian men, for example, are similar to Polish men because the masculinity dimension was, this gender dimension was very important. So this gendered essentialization of people, of refugees on these two different borders, Belarusian and Ukrainian, supporting this kind of reinforcement of the binary. And the binary, in this binary, white Ukrainian were refugees, was confronted, was opposed to non-white illegal migrants from the Middle East on the Polish-Belarusian border. And what was very important that there was also a kind of shift, because before the full-scale invasion of Putin on Ukraine, in earlier times, Ukrainian men have been perceived in Poland as non-quite-white, as inferior workers in relation to Polish people. So after this full-scale invasion of Putin and war, it completely, in this first period, it changed. They were invited to this kind of brotherhood, a community of value. So when we look again at the Polish-Belarusian border, we could see how the portrayals of non-white migrants, asylum seekers, was constructed there. What was also important, in that moment, the Polish right-wing government started public media campaigns. The part of these campaigns was portrayals of unbridled sexuality among non-white men on the Polish-Belarusian border. The part of these campaigns was the use of white women's bodies as a battleground. There was a lot of examples, a kind of the assumed rapes of Polish white women in Western Europe. This kind of examples or associations was in very present in media, in press, in social media. So for Polish men, it was very important them to construct new role on the eastern, this new position of the eastern side, eastern border of Poland helps them to feel as a kind of guardians of the biopolitical kingdom of whiteness. They feel they perceive themselves on a moral mission to prevent access Muslim other, men, Muslim, Oriental, unfaithful, of course, constructed to the European Union, to the Europe, to the Polish, to the Poland. The new geopolitical context of the emerging importance of the eastern border of Poland has allowed the Polish returnees to see themselves once again as gatekeepers to the West, has allowed them acting as emissaries of the West and contributing to the Polish national imaginary of Poland as a defenders of Western Christianity. So it helped to revive the sense of pride in peripheral white masculinities and reclaim it as a core of European whiteness. But what was also very interesting, what we found with Dominika, we found that this kind of perspective, this process of the rationalization of non-white masculine migrants is not rigid and stable attitude. This attitude also shifts depending on the context, context defined by deficit or privilege. We found, and we now have to skip on to the Western Europe, we found that in some contexts, non-white masculine migrants are seen through gendered representation of Islam, are seen by our interviewees, economic migrant, Polish economic migrant in the Western Europe, they are seen as allies. And we found that this changing attitude when Muslim, non-white masculine migrants are seen as allies is connected with Polish migrant men in Western Europe's position defined by deficit. And what construct this deficit? Polish migrant men, for example, they don't meet Western standards of progressiveness, gendered progressiveness. Outside of work, they often feel isolated and kept at a distance by white men from their host communities. And in that situations, Polish men are able to imagine togetherness with men of color. Of course, on a symbolic, discursive, gendered and classed level. And they in that deficit position, in that position experienced by deficit, they can see, for example, Muslim color migrants as a group with which they could form a kind of strategic alliances. They, for example, often we found that they speak about in some contexts they speak about Muslim migrants in Western Europe as men which are able to have position of power in the families. They are strong. They are able to form strong communities. They believe that they have power in these communities. Of course, this is a kind of gendered imagination of Islam, but this is very important. And to sum up, we found that inclusion or exclusion to European values is constructed according gender and class dimension in the mechanism, and is rooted, is immersed in a mechanism of deficit privilege swing. So what are conclusions? When we started to analyze our different researches, what was important for us, very important for us was literature about racialization of Eastern Europeans in the context of East-West mobility, and we work on whiteness term, and we defined this term as real. We found we like that this term was defined as relational, tactical, with tactical nature, with ambiguous dimension. We like that this is constructed according privilege, deficit, inclusion, exclusion. And we found also in research about Polish migrants this kind of ambiguity, this kind of tactical and relational mechanism in constructing whiteness or not whiteness, and especially peripheral whiteness. And what was important, and what is our contribution to the literature, that we found, and Dominika, could you skip to another, the final slide? We found that this significant geopolitical shift in Eastern Europe, semi-peripheral position, the fact that that we gained the authority to act as a gatekeepers on the eastern borders, the rise of the strategic importance of Poland's eastern borders, and the power of determining who is deemed worthy of inclusion in European community of value, it opened for us this important dimension. It opened for us the class and gendered perspective, and we found that the racialization process involving Polish migrants is deeply intertwined with class and gender dimensions, and gender and class serves as a potential avenue through which whiteness can be constructed, claimed, contested. The gender and class emerge as a key criteria for selection, deservingness, inclusion and exclusion in and from European identity. And the mechanism which is very important and which the mechanism which triggers this dimension is deficit privilege swing. And this swing drives practices of rationalization and is very, very close associated with constructing of peripheral whiteness. So it is from our contribution to the literature, and we are very interesting what your comments, your opinions, and we are thank you for patient, and we now we can skip to the discussion part.
Sylwia and Dominika for that presentation. I would like to invite the audience to post any questions that they have for our speakers in the chat. And while we're waiting on the questions appearing in the chat, I would just like to pose a question to Dominika and Sylwia about the presentation. And in particular, I'm very much interested in understanding to what extent the concept of peripheral whiteness is influenced by class and or gender, and the extent to which it's part of someone's own racial prejudices, if that makes sense. I think listening to the presentation, I find it slightly problematic, the assumption that because someone has experienced prejudice, racial prejudice, that they in turn internalize that and are ready to in turn be racially prejudiced against another group. And I think it was just to have an understanding of, was that the majority of respondents, or was it just some of them, or were there other factors that created that racial prejudice, if that makes sense at all, and I may be completely misunderstanding the presentation.
Yeah, thank you for this question. And it's an important one because we were thinking about this a lot when we were writing the article. First of all, we don't want to sound as it is only, lower classes, working classes that racialize others. It is just that we feel that those occupying middle class position learn more subtle ways of racialization. And there is an excellent article written by Fox and Mogilnicka about this. So this sort of racial categories were employed by all of our participants. Interestingly, while we don't argue that Polish migrants were free from races where they were moving to the West, it feels that they learn very specific ways in which structural races works in a country like Britain, and they learn how to navigate it to their own advantage. And they are quite aware of it, both recognizing their racial privilege, something that they might have not been aware of when working in Poland, a country that when they were living was largely homogeneous. It's changing now. So it also and this is also an argument that Ben Gidley makes, that in fact it is people, while the sort of middle classes like to talk about their likeness of super diverse society, in fact the same was true for our participants. So in fact, it was the research participants working in factories, working in construction businesses that actually had much more contact with people of color, both citizens and migrants, than this sort of white-collar Polish migrants working in often largely white environments. So I think this context matters, and hopefully it sort of helps you to or helps me to explain the presentation.
Thank you. No, thank you. That was very clear. So we have some questions now coming in on the chat. The first question is asking if the representation of Ukrainian refugees, if it's shifted more recently and in what ways. And the questioner understands that attitudes towards Ukrainian refugees have become more negative in Poland and was wondering what effects that may have had.
Sylwia, do you want to take it, or shall I take it?
Yes, we can share also.
Okay, go ahead.
The answer is complicated, and we spoke earlier with Dominika about how we can explain it if this kind of question will appear on the on our in our discussion. The perspective towards Ukrainian shifted completely. Now it is very difficult. We have a lot of negative patterns which are part of the perspective. The political campaign use xenophobic, negative portrayals of Ukrainian people. There is a lot of components which use to build negative perspective. One of the component is from history, history of fighting between Polish and Ukrainians, and it is very used by right-wing parties. And also the one argument which built negative position toward Ukrainians is the social transfers, for example, for Ukrainian women and children, and this is another dimension which built negative attitude. And there is also a kind of very difficult and strange attitude which is connected with question about possibility of Russian attack into Poland, and possibility and will to fight will of Polish men to fight. And there is a kind of also rivalization about who can fight more, who is able to fight, and this position make a kind of opposition towards Ukrainian. But this is difficult to explain the rationality of it. I'm not sure if I explained it properly. Maybe Dominika, you can add something to this.
Well, just to add that, yes, we feel like, of course, this attitudes towards Ukrainians have changed dramatically in the past couple of months. So it feels like it's a speculation, but it feels like people now no longer constitute this sort of brotherhood of hardworking, fighting hand in hand Ukrainians and Poles. It feels like when we look at the public opinion polls, Ukrainian workers feel discriminated on the labor market here, and feel increasingly culturally again constructed as other. So I suspect that when we would return to our research participants, we would hear reflection of this. However, as Sylwia has pointed, it feels also that our research participants, and I guess we as humans, can live with these contradictions. So I feel that in many respects, those construction of Ukrainian gendered whiteness, also let's remember that those fleeing from Ukraine were mainly women. So it was like an ideal type of refugee constructed, again, masculinized migration coming from the Belarusian border. So this really served our research participant to create an opposition in which, and this opposition was made to prove that this coming in through Belarusian border are this non-deserving, and the deservingness of Ukrainians were granted temporarily. And I think this aspect, I sense, might be changing now.
Okay, thank you both. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about negotiating issues of insider-outsider status in the fieldwork that you've conducted.
Mm. Thank you for this question. So before we wrote this piece with Sylwia, I wrote a piece on class and racialization of Poles and Lithuanians with my Lithuanian colleague Irma Budga-Naita. And we both came to that. So I'm coming to this research also, yes, with a sort of personal heritage of being, of living in the UK for many years. And my first instances of living in and working in Britain as a person working in advertising agency, as a strategist working in the advertising agency, was exactly some of the reflections shared by Amelia. So my nick, like, and it's not to really, try to paint myself as a victim, but really, trying to understand this nuanced forms that I didn't even understood at that time as racism, where people would tell me, oh, you don't look Eastern European, or oh, you don't sound Eastern European. And yet people in my work environment giving me a nickname of wooden toys. And it was both hilarious and kind of weird, because the assumption was that as a kid from behind the Iron Curtain, I probably didn't have cool toys to play with. And, people in HR department constantly telling me how proud my parents must be, because all other Poles that they met were cleaners. And for many years, I couldn't quite understand how to conceptually frame this. And this research that we did with our Lithuanian colleagues and Polish colleagues, where other people sort of came across this sort of allusions, were really helpful for me. And also things really changed for many of our research participants during and throughout Brexit, where people felt really hurt and like took it quite personally. So yeah, I guess insider. So yeah, so I feel like indeed, like to some extent, I feel like this person that could escape as in some circumstances as middle class white, but in others, it's difficult to spell my Eastern European name. I have a Polish sounding accent, and in some respects, I do experience some forms of othering that are, of course, uncomparable to the forms of othering that citizens of color, but also other migrants experience. So I want to also state it very clearly.
But this is precisely why your research is so important, because it's a way of documenting the discrimination and the experience that Polish migrants face in different contexts, and East European migrants in general. So thank you for doing such important research, Sylwia and Dominika. I have some more questions in the chat. There's a question on the racialization of Ukrainian women in Poland and about different concepts of beauty. So I don't know if that's a thing in Poland or not. And I don't know if you want to comment on that. And then there's another question, but I feel we've already covered that one on research in light of growing anti-Ukrainian sentiment in Poland. But I think that one's already been covered. And there's a further question that I have on wondering if you could speak to the possible implications of the different time differences of the three pre-existing projects that you've researched on, in the sense, does the possible implications of those different time periods show how whiteness has shifted over the different events, if that makes sense? So in the paper, you're explicitly revisiting three pre-existing projects to generate theoretical synergies. So is the implication of the time at which those projects were conducted, does it show how the concept of whiteness has shifted over time?
I can answer on the answer the question of Karolina Bielenin-Lęczowska. The first question about different canon of beauty and the role of it in the racialization processes. It is an excellent question because it is very important. The canons of beauty are the core of the genderization, gender dimension of rationalization processes. And of course, for example, in my research in the villages in the eastern part of Poland, I found I found this kind of discourse about Ukrainian refugee women who decided to settle in Polish villages, and they were in Polish villages, which are, for example, in the discourse, in public discourse and media discourse in Poland, are perceived as in class categories and in this kind of rationalization class categories. But I found a lot of examples that Ukrainian women are different, inferior because how they look like, because they are very bold in their way of putting makeup. They are full of gold elements. So it was this kind of traits for differentiation was used by my informants. But for example, in the Western Europe, I found, for example, Anna Safuta, excellent researcher, found also that women from Eastern Europe are portrayed, the canon of beauty of Eastern Europe are very stereotyped. For example, in Belgium, Polish cleaners, Polish women cleaners are perceived as a natural born cleaners, and they are portrayed as a women with bigger muscles with stronger physical buildings, which make them able to make harder physical work, for example. And also, for example, women from Eastern European countries are also portrayed as a more putting more this kind of style which allowed them to present themselves as more sexual objects, for example, very fitted kind of clothes. So this kind is this kind of portrayals using beauty standards are very popular in these rationalization processes, but they are popular everywhere. And in Western Europe, and also in Polish relation towards Ukrainian.
Thank you. The questions are coming in quite quickly on the chat. I wonder if we could jump to a question from Bartosz on critical race theory. And it's about your use of the theoretical lens of intersection and intersectionality, and thinking down the line of Crenshaw's work on critical race theory. And they're wondering if there are any ways of thinking from this theoretical lens that you could use in your research or in future research on peripheral whiteness or white privilege. And they reference the US civil rights movement. I'm wondering if there's anything from that you can draw upon.
So actually, thank you for this question. Interesting. So actually, we were really challenged by one of our brilliant reviewers to really, think about what we mean when we say that we do this intersectional analysis. And in the text, we really try to work hard to explain how we sort of don't think of these different categories as categories that add on one another, but as categories that work in sort of at this intersection, so that they mutually reinforce each other. So I believe that I think by now, and there is a book edited by Gawlewicz, Narkowicz, and Pędziwiatr this year about race and race relations in Eastern Europe. I feel like we sort of established by now this idea of sort of peripherality, and I feel where more work is needed is to look at these different intersections, because I think that within the stream of thinking, we tend to sort of group all migrants into and treat them all sometimes as homogeneous group, but actually when when it becomes apparent, when we start to analyze this gender, linguistic, and class differences. And additionally, while of course now for the sake of presentation, we are treating Eastern Europe as a whole, like we already alluded in the answers that, well, like there are also internal hierarchies of whiteness within the Eastern Europe of, as some would like to claim, Central Eastern Europe. So that's also important. And I think, and this is I'm looking at a question from EPEC. While we focus specifically on the experiences of Eastern Europeans and their experience of mobility, I think the broader argument that we are trying to make is how these categories of race, racialization, othering are really used to exclude or include certain groups of people, and how this is completely arbitrary and conditional, and those kind of combination or constellation of one constitutes a privilege or a deficit may vary depending on context and depending on time.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We have a question on the deficit privilege swing from Ope. And they are wondering how this might position Polish migrants when thinking about being categorized as either a minority group or as part of the majority. For example, when self-identifying on diversity monitoring forms. I don't know if you wish to comment on that question.
I'm not sure if I understand it exactly, but I would like to link this maybe with this other question about how it will be changing with time. And I think what we are observing already is this second generation of Eastern European migrants. So people born already in the UK, already in France, Belgium, or Germany. And I think this will be interesting to see how this dynamics work in the second generation, where some of this deficits, such as language, looks, different ways of behaving, may become less visible. So I think that would be a sort of interesting dimension of research.
Yes, I always find it, I'm white Scottish and I'm always conflicted. Do I put white Scottish, white British on these monitoring forms as well? And I think the problem is that you can have multiple identities and it's very hard being forced to choose one particular identity on the monitoring forms, whether it's in your place of employment or for the general census. So I personally resist being confined to like just a white Scottish identity, prefer white European, so it's hard. So we have some more questions. Lots of thank yous in the questions for the talk. I think it's inspired a lot of people to pose very interesting questions. Igor wants to hear more about the Polish-Belarus border and how much of it is accessible to humanitarian organizations, researchers and the public, and how basically have you managed to do fieldwork in that area?
Sylwia, do you want to take this?
Yes, we have still very difficult situation on Polish-Belarusian border. We don't have in the first phase we have a kind of state emergency zone, militarized zone, into which journalists, NGOs, activists.
I think the sound has gone from Sylwia.
Yeah, same here. Sylwia, something. So
Can you
hear
me now? No?
Yes, now.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
We have still a difficult situation on the Polish-Belarusian border. Of course, we don't have exactly the same form as it was in the first year, where the Polish government, Polish right-wing government, installed their a kind of state of emergency zone, a zone which was militarized and which into this zone, journalists, NGOs, activists was not able to enter legally. Only residents was able to be present in that zone. Now the situation is not change. We don't have this kind of zone, but there is the zone is closer the border, and activists have have to deal still with the punishments, with the persecutions. We have still processes of activists who are accused of helping, who are accused about helping refugees there, which is not allowed by Polish government. So the situation is still difficult, but we has in Poland a kind of social researcher network, social researcher and activist network. The important one, the most important one is researchers on the borders. In Polish it is badacze i badaczki na granicy. And these researchers monitoring situation on the border, they combine activist and researchers' role. They make a kind of archives about what is happened there. They are documenting a lot of processes which happens there. So activists and social researchers are very present there. And for example, our research, the part of our research comes from research in the state emergency zone, because I was with my friend, with Przemysław Sadura. We don't know why, but we were the soldiers allowed us to enter into this zone, and we told that we want to speak with inhabitants, and they check that we are not journalists, that we are not activists, that we are sociologists, that they allowed us enter this zone. So the results which we analyzed with Dominika came from researching this emergency state zone inside of this zone.
Mm-hmm. And if I may just ask one or maybe two sentences to provide a broader picture. So this militarization at the moment and securitization of this Polish-Belarusian border has been happening for quite some time. Started by the right-wing government, the liberal government continues to do so, and it's happening with the full sort of green light from the EU. And a few months ago, we observed something which has been unprecedented so far in Polish legal system, where it's not now people who are fleeing from Belarus or through Belarus actually are not able to submit their asylum application at that particular border. So yes, and I just sent the link to this group that Sylwia mentioned, Badacze i Badaczki na granicy. They used to have a site in English. I cannot find it now, but there is an email that if people are interested in contacting them and having their own research ideas, they are the group that will be eager to facilitate and enter dialogue, I'm sure.
Thank you both. I'm very conscious of time. It is now almost 5:30 and we're reaching the end of our allotted time. There is a question or a comment rather in the post about wanting to hear more about disability, LGBTQ and disabled experiences. But I don't think we've got time to cover that today unless Sylwia wants to come in on that.
Maybe one sentence. LGBT people are fleeing from Poland to Western Europe to gain access to basic rights, because in Polish context, LGBT people has no access to civil marriage, they don't have access to legal rights to adopt children, to marry in legal ways. So we have a kind of emigration of LGBT people to Western Europe for human rights, to gain access to human rights.
Yeah. Well, Dominika and Sylwia, thank you so much for your presentation and also your very thoughtful engagement with the questions as well. Hope to invite you back on another occasion to see how your research is going, but very, very grateful for your presentation and for the discussion as well. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's event. And there is a note in the chat about the 2026 event series, which is soon to be announced. And that will be featured in the Identities newsletter and on social media, Blue Sky, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So you'll be able to stay up to date. So bardzo dziękuję. Do widzenia. Dobry wieczór.
Dziękujemy bardzo.
Dziękujemy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for your time and for staying with us. It was a pleasure. Thanks.
It was a big pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.